excited to host a Red Cloud webinar on mineral exploration in Newfoundland today. We will hear from Chris Pennimpede, President and CEO of Canterra Minerals Corporation. During today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook, and then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss some fine print during this Canterra webinar. Forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined in the Canterra corporate presentation, and that can be found on the company's website, canterraminerals.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors, and participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures pertaining to Canterra. So we have Canterra Minerals presenting today. The company has pulled together a significant package of exploration properties in Newfoundland, including both gold targets and polymetallic VMS deposits. This includes the relatively recent acquisition of the past-producing Buchans mine, as well as a cluster of VMS deposits in the area. It also includes property along strike of Caliber's Valentine Lake mine, where the company has identified gold exploration targets. With that, I now turn it over to Chris to update our audience on the company.
Thanks, Timothy, and good afternoon, everyone. And as Timothy laid out there for me, Canterra Minerals is indeed in exploring in Central Newfoundland for both gold and critical minerals. We started out in Central Newfoundland in 2020 with the ground directly abutting and adjacent to what is now Caliber Mining's Valentine mine and their 5 million ounces. And in 2021, with the height of Newfoundland gold euphoria, we went from a 6 million market cap to a 30 million market cap. And given we were exploring in a traditional base metals camp, and that was underpinned by the former Tier 1 mine you see in the background image of the title slide here, the Buchans mine, that Asarco mined for over 50 years, it made sense for us to reduce our exploration risk, given we were drilling very early stage gold exploration holes, and look more broadly in the VMS, or the massive sulfide geology, some of which we already captured with our gold projects. And so the known massive sulfide deposits, and these are primary zinc copper deposits, were up for purchase. So we made the first acquisition in 2021, and then ultimately saw our goal to consolidate the entire Central Newfoundland mining district at the end of 2023, which included purchasing the Buchans mine and the last known other massive sulfide deposits we didn't already own. And so now we sit with 7 VMS deposits under management, as well as the next 60 kilometers of the Valentine Lake shear zone as it extends from Caliber's new mine. So today we are embarking on our maiden drill campaign on the Buchans project. This former Tier 1 mine produced an astounding 16 million tons of 14% zinc, 7% lead, 1% copper, 100 grams per ton silver, and 1 gram per ton gold. It was the average head grade over its 50 years of mine life. It started in the 20s and eventually shuttered completely in 1984. So what remains today, we will take you through the resources that were left behind and where we see the real opportunity in this project to make new discoveries within the brown fields, and that's where our current drill program is focusing. Timothy already made our forward-looking statements and disclosures, and I'll just add, because we do have 7 mineral resources within Canterra, within the Central Newfoundland mining belt, please review that on our website. So I'm a geologist by background and training, and spent most of my career in the Canadian North, Yukon, Alaska, Nunavut, and then later in Nevada and elsewhere in the world. Been at this almost 20 years. And then joining me on the rest of the team at Canterra, 2 key technical people, Newfoundland-based geologists, Paul Moore and David Butler, each 30 years experience within massive sulfide deposits, both in Newfoundland and Labrador, but also around the world, working with Teck and Anglo-American. So they are based in St. John's and have worked in the Central Newfoundland mining district for at least the last 7 years. So they're our key technical folks. The rest of the board is made up of capital markets people and some Newfoundland business folks with Nick Coleman. And then some people may know Josh Surface, formerly Integra Gold, which was sold to Eldorado, and then Integra Resources. So as Timothy mentioned, we've spent since 2021 basically putting together the Newfoundland mining district, 4 acquisitions in 4 years, resulting in our 7 resource stage projects. And so we are 300 million shares outstanding today, just under 2 million in cash because we're actively drilling right now. And we have runway from a treasury point of view until March of 2025. So the right way to look at the basic share ownership, particularly after the Buchans acquisition, which was completed at the end of 2023, is Buchans shareholders own 60% of the basic share ownership. Canterra shareholders own 40%. And that's where a who's who of notable resource investors come into play, with Michael Gentili, who's been a supportive shareholder since 2020 when we started in Central Newfoundland, and has maintained his pro rata in every acquisition and financing since. And then Eric Sprott came in 2021. So although the 300 number looks big, I would suggest, because Buchans Resources shareholders are a small number of mostly retail and high net worth shareholders, it's tighter than the number appears. So all told, we now have 26 million tons under management across these deposits listed here. And the main thing to highlight in this list is the most metal in the ground comes from the Lundberg deposit. And this is the deposit that's within the former Buchans mine. So it's the biggest contributor to our total metal inventory right now. So a global resource, we have contains almost 300 million pounds of copper, or if you would like to do a copper equivalent on our total metal content, because these are true polymetallic deposits, we're almost a billion, just over 1 billion pounds of copper equivalent. So VMS deposits have largely hadn't had a lot of fanfare in recent times, though historically deposits like SK Creek and Flin Flon Camp and some of the Bulletin mining VMS deposits in Sweden they're very high grade deposits that create good margins because they're typically low tonnage. But these are some of the more active explorers and developers in the massive sulfide space. So Canterra today, this is slightly out of date. This is 26 million tons. And you can see we're around a 12 million market cap as of this morning. The average grade over our 26 million tons would be a 2.1% copper equivalent. Abitibi's been doing really well in Quebec with making new discoveries on their project. And the poster child for us, and I guess what all VMS explorers and developers are pushing toward, would be Foran Mining. They recently announced a $600 million financing with the likes of Agnico Eagle, Pierre Lassonde, and Fairfax Holdings. And they've been picking away at the McIlvenna Bay deposit and that associated VMS camp just west of the Flin Flon mining camp in Manitoba for some time now, and have attracted a lot of capital and made a lot of discoveries, particularly at the McIlvenna Bay deposit, where they've now pushed it to almost 40 million tons. And so that's where that would be an outside goal for Canterra, where we're 26 million tons today, just getting going on the exploration front. And so I would suggest that, Foran was successful with just one deposit and making it much bigger. And that's what we're hoping to do at Buchans and some of the other deposits we've put together in the Central Newfoundland mining district. All right, here's the island of Newfoundland, and we're going to zoom in to the central part of the island. And I'm just going to quickly point out to orient everyone here that this is the Valentine Lake shear zone. I'm not drawing it very well because it's harder to draw with the mouse than the iPad. But it bisects the island for over 200 kilometers. Omega Metals owns this part, and the southwest portion of it, 1 million ounces there, and it was attracted significant investment from B2. Eldorado just recently did a $15 million deal to acquire 80% via joint venture eventually, if they see it through, from True Precious and their 40 kilometers of the shear zone. This is Calibre and their new Valentine mine, 5 million ounces, and their 40 kilometers of the shear zone. And where we started in 2020 was here at the Wilding Gold Project. So Canterra claims are in blue here. And we've amassed the next 60 kilometers of that shear zone as it trends to the northeast. Again, we've had some drill success on the gold side at Wilding, hitting 50 gram meters in 2 places and then 20 gram meters over a couple hundred meters. But we're challenged by more cover on our portion of the Valentine Lake shear zone. And so the next round of holes we were proposing were very high risk and almost drilling blind. And at the same time, that's when our market cap escalated. And so we looked beside us and adjacent to us and recognized that this is really, or what was predominantly base metals camp. And that was anchored by the Buchans mine up here north of Beothic Lake. And we discussed what it produced for almost 50 years via the 4 head frames there. And that's what really brought people and infrastructure into this part of Central Newfoundland. So Central Newfoundland didn't have anything until they discovered this, the massive sulfide showings in the early 1920s. And that's when people and roads and rail came into this part of Central Newfoundland. And then since then, the next mine to go in was Teck's Duck Pond mine here. It was an order of magnitude smaller than Buchans. So Buchans produced 16 million tons. Duck Pond produced 5 million tons at roughly about half the grade of Buchans, but it worked nonetheless, shuttering in 2015. And so in the Duck Pond geology, we acquired the Lamarchant deposit, the Long Lake deposit, and then the Boomerang and Tulks deposits. So smaller massive sulfide deposits, but high grade. Their grade is similar to Duck Pond. They're just, right now, Lamarchant is half the size. And then after that, our goal was always to acquire Buchans, as we thought that's where the next tier 1 discovery could be made in this camp, was within the brownfields. So we acquired Buchans at the end of 2023, and along with that came Bobby's Pond and Daniel's Pond. So this is the first time that the entire VMS belt has been put together like this. It's always been piecemeal. And if you look at Foran Mining, they've done much the same thing, where they acquired the McIlvenna Bay deposit, and then the other outlying deposits they've also acquired and pushed forward from an exploration point of view. But for Canterra, our flagship is now the Buchans project. We've gone through a target ranking exercise, and it's clearly sits above the rest of these deposits in terms of the prospectivity to make a new high-grade massive sulfide discovery on the copper and zinc side. So we're going to jump into Buchans now. So this is the town that ASARCO built to support the mine. So you can see the traditional mine row houses here in the background, and the head frame. One head frame still remains here. This mined the Lucky Strike deposit. Somewhere out here was the Oriental deposit, and then there was another 2 head frames in the northwest direction here on the left-hand side of the page that access the deposit as it plunges down to the northwest. So there's 4 head frames in total, all an underground mine. So today, you can't really get better access for drilling. You have this town site which supported the mine here, and then most of the people that live here, population 600, now after that supported Teck's Duck Pond mine, and now a lot of them work at Calibur's mine. So as far as stakeholders, you can't really beat that. And this is a community that wants to see new mines go ahead so that this community can continue to thrive. So where we're drilling right now, we stay in this house here. There's only one hotel in Buchans here, and we basically walk down and we're drilling just south of the head frame right now, somewhere in that vicinity. So our drill costs, you can't get cheaper than this unless you're probably right in the heart of Val-d'Or, Quebec. So our drill costs right now are around $147 a meter, and that includes assays. So ultra low drill costs, which should ultimately lead to ultra low discovery costs in this mature jurisdiction. So we're diving beneath the head frame now. So the head frame is right up here. You can see this vertical projected shaft. And so this was the underground workings that ASARCO made. And these volumes have been taken out of what is now an existing resource that has been contained into an open pit shell. So when we at Canterra did the due diligence on this this bulk tonnage resource was interesting to us. It's 16 million tons, just by coincidence. It's the same number of tons that ASARCO pulled out of here. But ultimately, where ASARCO mined the head grade, it was 14% copper, better than 7% lead, 14% zinc, better than 7% lead, 1% copper, and 1 gram per ton gold, and 100 grams silver. This is the stockwork mineralization that fed that ultra high grade massive sulfide. So what exists today is more of a bulk tonnage target here, and thus is why it's been the resource is projected to work in an open pit environment. And so you can see the combined base metals is 4%. And so what this represents when we were doing our due diligence, that this was just a substantial metal inventory in which future exploration success could only augment. I will point out to viewers that this resource estimate is based on 2019 metal price environment, critically, which means $3 copper. And so just by moving to $4 copper where we sit today, we know we could bring in additional mineralization, push the pit wall back, and easily increase the resource at least 10%, just by working with today's metal price environment. But what we were excited about when doing the due diligence was the Buchans Resources team had made 2 high-grade discoveries outside the resources, and this was called the 2-level target. And this was demonstrated that there's classic high-grade Buchans style mineralization yet to be discovered within the brownfields. And so the discovery interval was just 1 meter, but 15% combined base metals in transported material, and that'll become important in a minute. And it was left open. And so what we are most interested in then is the exploration potential to find that classic high-grade Buchans style mineralization to augment this 16 million tons. Because even 1 million tons at 15% combined base metals fundamentally would change the economics behind this existing resource base. So this is the geological model that was produced, and it's just a sort of the typical VMS model. But I'm just going to demonstrate that right now this is where that bulk tonnage resource exists at the Lundberg deposit. So it averages 2 to 6% combined base metals, and it's what fed the massive sulfide deposit, the Lucky Strike deposit in this case. And that's where they mined 25 to 28% combined base metals. And then this would have been, for demonstration purposes, Oriental. But coming off of these massive sulfide deposits, as they failed downslope across the bottom of the seafloor, they were transported and redeposited. And so in most VMS systems, these transported material doesn't account for a lot of the ore, but at Buchans, it's a bit unusual, where 52% of the total ore mined was in this transported ore class. And the grade wasn't diluted that much. It still averaged 16 to 22% combined base metals in these debris flow deposits. And so Buchans Resources had a 2-year cooperation agreement with the giant Swedish miner, VMS miner, Boliden. And what they surmised from this, that, okay, the 2-level discovery is way out here, a long ways from Lucky Strike, much further than would be a reasonable transport distance. So there must be other massive sulfide sources feeding these debris flow deposits. And so their exploration hypothesis was to explore within the brownfields to make a new Lucky Strike or Oriental style discovery, where you see those ultra high grades hosted in the in situ massive sulfide. So taking us to where we are exploring today and the targets that Bulletin developed with Buchans resources. This is the pit shell in blue. Well, that's a poor color choice. This is the pit shell in blue right now. And these red blobs here, these are all transported ore deposits that they mined, Sarco mined during the mine life. So over 12 million tons were mined out of this ore channel trending northwest, but it's all transported material. Lucky Strike here was only 5 million tons, the in situ massive sulfide. So the question Bulletin had was, where did these 12 million tons come from? And so their concept, and now our exploration thesis, was this is where 2 level sits. If we drill in the northwest direction, 2 level is a debris flow mineralization or transported mineralization, that if we drill in the down plunge direction here, eventually there's a good chance you'll discover an in situ massive sulfide that would be feeding these 12 million tons of transported mineralization. And so that's our exploration concept. So we embarked on drilling 2,000 meters at the end of August. And we started within the resource, as there are some gaps there. And as I'd mentioned previously, with $4 copper, we drilled outside the pit shell to hopefully be able to lay back the walls of the pit shell and bring in more tons. But ultimately, we're drilling at 2 level here in an attempt to continue to build that transported mineralization in the northwest direction. So certainly we'll have both high grades and long widths of base metal mineralization within the pit shell and on the outside, and hopefully in extending 2 level, we will see the continuation of that classic Buchans style high grade debris flow style mineralization to the northwest. So that sums up what our current exploration and exploration drilling is focusing on. But if you ask me why we ultimately acquired this, we have to go beyond the mine trend. Though the targets in there are valid and there's a substantial metal inventory in which to start from, the real prize here, the prize where I can point to, okay, we have an existing resource base, much like Foran did with Mekovinia Bay. Where do we go outside to double that, to get to that sort of 30 to 40 million ton marker? And that's where this Clementine trend comes into play. So it's a 3-kilometer trend starting from the northwest here at Clementine and extending to Clementine West. And ultimately, what exists here is Clementine West. We have a stockwork mineralization, just like the stockwork we see at Lundberg. And then at the Clementine target itself in the north here, we have a transition, just like we see at the mine work zone with transported mineralization. We have a 2-kilometer trend of the right rocks, that is the Buchans River Formation. And so we can work backwards from the stockwork through geophysical methods like deep seeking IP to work from the stockwork, which should be chargeable, to an actual in situ massive sulfide deposit that the stockwork would have fed and would be the source for this transported mineralization. So that's the real upside for Canterra as an exploration company, is to make a whole new 15 to 16 million ton high grade mine trend like discovery, like Asarco discovered in the 1920s. And so that's the going forward goal for Canterra, is after this drill program in the mine trend, prove our exploration concept, and then branch out to the rest of the project bounds to find another mine trend within the Buchans River Formation, which is the key host unit for these massive sulfides in this part of Newfoundland. So how we're going to do that is Newfoundland and Labrador governments being incredibly supportive of the extractive industries. They have meticulously maintained all 400,000 meters of drill core and all the level plan and mine maps, adits, stopes, and housed them for the better part of decades now. And so we are going to mine that data. And so this is what it looks like. They just threw all the core into, there's two of these old mine warehouses. They're stacked floor to ceiling. You can go to the original 1924 discovery hole and look at it. But this represents an incredible resource for Canterra to mine, to fill in the gaps that exist from the paper data. And so that was a big part of what Bulletin contributed, is they spent 2 years relogging with funding Buchans resource geologists, which we now assume, relogging over 200,000 meters within the mine trend and doing whole rock samples, doing all the right things to build, for the first time, a database of this project, bringing it in to digital space and, more importantly, 3D. And so we now have the 3D model for this project, which is the first time in the project history, in which we can base exploration decisions off of and see trends. And really what this is the perfect data set for is AI-driven targeting techniques. When you have this much data and it's over several terabytes, it would take a human geologist years to build up all the layers and make interpolations. And so that's really where AI could help us a lot. And we're embarking on that right now, partnering with Verify Technologies. So as far as the immediate catalysts for Canterra, we're drilling on the Buchans project. Again, this is our maiden drill program on it. It hasn't been drilled publicly in a number of years. So I think the market will be surprised to the upside that there's a lot of metal in the ground here, and this project can certainly deliver high grade base metal mineralization. So I think drilling 10 meters of 20% combined base metals will certainly surprise the market, as the Buchans project hasn't really been seen in a long time. And so viewers can look forward to that in early October. We'll be finished the drill program in late September here, but of course we started in early August, so there's already drill core that's in the lab. And so expect a result early October, and then thereafter we'll look towards the Verify AI and see what AI can do as far as identifying other targets within the project area that have all the hallmarks of the mine trend. So other than that, that's my pitch for today, or update on everything we have going on in Canterra, in the Central Newfoundland mining district. But ultimately, we're drilling at Buchans, and you can expect results in the near term. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chris, for the very informative presentation. We will now start the Q&A portion of this webinar. A reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. And we already do have a few questions here. First, looking at, obviously, the Buchans mine is past producing mine here. Will you use the existing mine infrastructure? Thinking about a future operation, or would you need to build new infrastructure there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the existing infrastructure, though, it looks like there's actually a lot there. It's really just the mine buildings, and so there's nothing useful left. So the mill is stripped out, which would have been the most useful thing. So other than that, no, it'll be all new equipment, unfortunately. The town still use the old, like, early days style hydroelectric power. So that's the only thing that still exists. Even rail has been taken out of all of Newfoundland. Actually, Newfoundland took up its rail for some reason a while ago. But we're road accessible. This is right off the Trans-Canada Highway, and so deep water. Tidewater is just 100 kilometers to the north. So as far as infrastructure goes, it's very well positioned. Power, obviously, but as far as mine buildings or mills, that would all have to be new.
Okay, great. We did have one question come in here. Obviously, now you're focused on Newfoundland, but you have had some other projects in the company. We did have one question about what happened to the previous Ring of Fire activity.
Yeah, good question. So Canterra has a substantial pipeline of projects, and which we've been monetizing or finding partners to help spend other people's money to bring our exploration concepts forward. And with the Ring of Fire, we continue to look for partners on that. And so, viewers should stay tuned for successful. It's certainly an area that's seeing a lot of attention right now on the nickel front. And so we're still pushing forward on all our pipeline projects in finding partners and then monetizing those assets and maintaining exposure to a royalty, like we just did on the Buffalo Hills diamond asset we sold to Star Diamonds.
Okay. Now, looking at the exploration side, has recent deep geophysics been done at Buchans, such as gravity and VTEM?
VTEM has substantially, and that's part of why this project was available. Is previous operators would come in here and do a VTEM survey or ground EM, and they wouldn't see a big conductive anomaly, and they would say, "Oh, there's nothing here." But in the last couple of years, especially with Bulletin's input, the mineralization here that gives you the ultra high grade is sphalerite dominant, so it's a poor conductor. And so a big contribution from Bulletin was the actual Buchans in situ massive sulfide mineralization. You're not going to be able to see with EM. And so a better way probably to vector to it is to vector to the stockwork which fed that massive sulfide, which you could see from deep seeking IP, for example, because it's chargeable. Whereas the Buchans style massive sulfide mineralization is pyrite poor, and so it doesn't produce a good conductivity anomaly. So thereby, what Bulletin ultimately contributed was even a low to weak conductivity anomaly combined with low magnetic susceptibility would be a very interesting target for potentially high grade in situ massive sulfide of the Buchans style. So since then we've inverted the magnetics and tied it in with the EM we have to identify those areas, and some of those areas are now being drilled as part of our exploration.
Okay. And a question here on the drilling: how many holes are planned to be completed within the 2,000 meter drill program?
It'll be 8 to 10 holes.
Mm-hmm.
we may extend or adjust things as necessary, but roughly 8 to 10 holes.
Okay, great. And kind of circling back on the infrastructure, are the actual Buchans mine workings accessible?
No, they're flooded and or backfilled with sand. No one really knows, but for the moment, no.
Okay. And circling back here on the geophysics, has there been any 3D IP done on the project?
That's a good question, and no, it's a glaring gap in the data set right now, and something we would like to address in the future, particularly do an orientation over the mine trend, and then if that works, then expand it to the Clementine area or some of the other prospects we have.
Great. And then looking at the strategy of future development, do you see developing a mine yourself, or would you ultimately be looking for partners, or is it too early to say?
Ultimately, we'll do all the right things as far as exploration and resource development so that we could develop, because that's the way you have to do things, especially even if your plan is to sell to a producer. So we'll check all the boxes and do it the right way. But as the team is built right now, we're explorationists. We're not development. So never say never. You've seen lots of junior explorers get to that phase where they do feasibility and then they retool and decide to put it into production themselves. But as of right now, we're explorers and we're not tooled up for that.
Great. Looking at your package of projects, obviously you have quite a bit to work with, particularly for a junior. Obviously the focus now is on the VMS side, but what about the golds? Would you look to do some work on the gold targets over the next year, or would you look to bring in a partner or do some kind of deal with the gold side?
Yeah, it's a good question, and certainly Calibre makes the most sense as a partner. So the long and short answer is, it's been easier to raise critical minerals flow through dollars right now because of the extra tax incentives the federal government's giving. Certainly, we've developed a suite of targets on our 60 kilometers of the shear zone. So I think the right way to approach that would be to bring in a partner to spend other people's money improving those targets out and having Canterra maintain exposure in the JV agreement. With the Eldorado deal that they did for True Precious ground, I thought that was a great deal for True Precious in the red here, and I would do that deal all day long on our 60 kilometers of the shear zone.
Okay, great. And one question here on community relations. What are relationships like with the local communities, and are there landowners that you have to work with on surface access?
Great question. And so within Buchans itself, we rent the core shack from the mayor, which is good. The mayor owns the home hardware because of course he does. And previously with Millertown, which is just over here, we employed the mayor of that town because she used to work for Tech as our core logger. And a lot of the townspeople we have as field assistants or core loggers. So suffice to say, the local stakeholders, as far as the town folks are concerned, very supportive. This town is diminishing significantly since the mine shuttered and Duck Pond shuttered. Calibre's helping a bit, but they really need a they need jobs, and so they're very supportive. And in fact, in Newfoundland, you don't have First Nations land settlement on the island. Labrador's a different story. So really, your stakeholders are, in our case, Buchans and Millertown out here. And so they've shown they're very supportive of everything Caliber's done and Marathon before that. And they're supportive, and we employ a fair number of them and work with their mayor. So you can't beat it. It's been the easiest in my entire career as far as a permitting regime and stakeholder relations. It doesn't get easier than this.
Great. And following up a bit on that, operating in Newfoundland, it's been at times a pretty hot exploration area there. Are you able to get a hold of good drills and experienced drillers? And following up on that, what are your drilling costs?
Yeah, great question. And so in 2021, like everyone else, it was hard to get good drillers. We were fortunate because we were a bit ahead of the curve. I knew going into it, having worked in Yukon in 2010 and 11, when you had to like bribe to get a helicopter or beg, I knew it would be hot. And so we did well there. And then since then, there's been a lot of attrition. You know, you've seen probably more than half the claims lapse, and it's just not that active. But the amount of drill companies and assay labs that have been built up was substantial. So both the program we did at Le Marchant back in winter and this current program, we're getting top tier drillers. The production is unlike most of what my team has seen in their career, which is great. So you're getting the best of the best right now, and just because you know, the drill companies are hungry for work. And so our drill costs, we're $200 a meter assays in, but I would suggest just seeing how we're tracking right now, we might even be as low as $150 by the time we're all said and done here.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
One additional question, always popular. How much cash do you have, and how far will that last with your current plan?
Yeah, no, it's a good question if you're eyeing an investment. We have $2 million in at the moment, or as of our last financials, which just came out. But we're actively drilling, so we're probably a bit under 2 million right now. I would say probably 1.85 million in the till, and that will get us until March 2025.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions we have, but maybe just I'll ask one here, just kind of a closer, but just to review, what are some key news items and catalysts for the company in the coming weeks and months?
Okay, yeah. So the most critical piece, it will be drill results, and those should be early October, and will flow through the remainder of 2024. Over and beyond that, we'll continue to try and find deals and partners for our pipeline projects. So there's a potential for some news flow on that side of things. And then ultimately, I think one of the bigger things that may not be so appreciated, but will be in the future, is the Verify AI. Verify is really pushing the AI hard in our business, and has been a leader in sort of bringing about proprietary algorithms to support the exploration space. And I think given the attention AI is getting in the more broader markets, I think what will come out of that might surprise people in terms of products that Explorer Coast could actually use to make discoveries and reduce the cost of discovery. So look out for that as well in the near future.
Great. And we did have one little question come in here. Can you touch on who owns royalties or streams on Buchans?
Yeah, good question. It's the royalty is 1% across the whole project, basically, to a few different prospectors. There's buy downs on some of them, so in some cases it's 0, but broadly speaking, it's a 1%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank Chris Pennimpede for presenting today, and thank you everyone on the line for tuning in. Note that Red Cloud Securities will be back tomorrow afternoon when our webinar series continues with BlackRock Silver presenting Thursday, September 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great rest of your day and happy investing.